Hey, everybody. Welcome to the DIY Musician Podcast. This is Cristina. Today, we have a special episode. We're celebrating 25 years of being in company. And it's sort of mind blowing and incredible that we've been able to do this for 25 years, and so much has changed in that time. So, I'm inviting two people that are very special to this company, Anna Held and Christine Barnum. Both have been really integral in shaping the way that the company has evolved over the last period of time, and both have really great stories and perspective on how much we have evolved. So let's bring them on.
You're listening
to the CD Baby
CD Baby
DIY
Musician
Podcast.
Hi. How you doing?
Hello.
This is Anna Held.
I'm Anna Held. I'm CD Baby's VP of Product Development.
And Christine Barnum.
Yeah, that's me. I'm Christine. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer.
And you guys have been here for a while, correct?
That is very correct.
As long as I've been at CD Baby, you've been at CD Baby. In fact, Anna, you gave me my first job at CD Baby. So thank you for that,
you got it.
for believing in me. So what year did you start? I mean, Christine, I think you've been here the longest, right?
Yeah, I started at CD Baby in February of 2006. It'll be 18 years. Not that I could do that. I just was talking to someone about it recently. They're like, it's 18 years.
And Anna, you've been here since 2008-ish?
Yeah, I started at Disc Makers in 2004. And then when CD Baby was purchased by Disc Makers in 2008, I came out. So I've been with I consider the same organization because I came,
Right.
through. I just had my 19-year anniversary in August.
Oh, man, that's amazing. That's so cool. Well, thank you both for coming on today. We wanted to talk about the fact that CD Baby has been a company now for 25 years, and so much has changed in that 25 years. And I know that both of you have had amazing perspectives since you've been here for at least 18 years. And I've been at CD Baby on and off since 2013 when I first started, and I was on your team, Anna, and then came back in 2017 after a brief hiatus. So I've had the opportunity to see some growth, but definitely not as much as the both of you have. And on that note, I kind of wanted to know what have your roles been since you've been here? Because I know that, those have evolved for all of us. And so each one sort of lends itself to different perspective.
So I moved to Portland from New York City, where I'd been working in music and doing royalties and things. And I was like, I'm never going to find a job in music ever again. And then I found CD Baby, and I was like, oh, that's the company with the horrible logo. I remember seeing them somewhere because it was like the baby face on the silver disc. So
I love that logo.
You might be the only one. I don't know.
I think I might be.
Yeah. But it was, as terrible as it was at least memorable. Like, I remembered seeing it years prior and was like, man, that's a bad logo. But I started and I interviewed with Derek, our founder, for a licensing position that I wasn't super stoked about, but I was like, well, it's a job in music, it's something. And so I interviewed, and he called me that night, and he was like, you got the job. He's like, but not the job that you interviewed for. He's like, I'm going to make you a job. I was like,
wow.
Okay, cool. And so at that point, like, iTunes was really just starting to become a thing that had legs and was generating a good amount of revenue. And up until that point, Derek had been the one processing the monthly royalty reports for digital sales. And he realized that there were better options. So he brought me in to do that. So I created, tracking receivables, making sure that what our contract said was what our report said in terms of what we're being paid. I did a stint doing inspections in my free time. Mm-hmm. That's something that we still do today. And then I guess Derek was thinking about selling the company, and his accountant at the time was like, you really need someone to manage accounting in-house. And they're like, Christine, you do spreadsheets. I was like, oh yes, I do spreadsheets. And so they offered me the role of controller, which I felt very unqualified for, but I was like, I'll give it a shot. And if I'm terrible, I'll stop doing it. And I felt very trial by fire, but
Mm-hmm.
I discovered a weird passion for accounting in that era. I ended up
How
going
Bless
is
back.
your
for
heart,
you?
Christine.
Yeah,
Bless
good
your
for
heart.
you.
I ended up going back to school for forensic accounting. Even
Oh, wow.
yeah,
I didn't even know that was a thing.
yeah, it
Thanks for
is.
doing
Hey, no problem. And so I did that, and my role just kind of grew and evolved over time as the company shifted, as our ownership shifted, and then eventually rolled into director of accounting, VP of accounting. I think there's an SVP of accounting and finance in there at some point. And then the role that I'm in now, when I was like, I've seen enough accounting and finance, I'm done with that. And then I transitioned to this role in about, I don't know, sometime during the pandemic.
Gosh, I couldn't hold on to numbers that long. I just they all turn around for me. It's just the whole thing. But that's amazing. So it's quite a journey.
Yeah, and I can't remember numbers to save my life.
Yeah.
I can remember where to look them up. So
Well, it's
That's where the spreadsheets come
makes
in,
you feel
Christine. You just
exactly.
yeah.
consult your spreadsheets.
It's
Yeah.
interesting that you say that you didn't feel like you were qualified for that job because I feel like that's just a running theme that everybody everywhere ever has, that anytime there's a promotion or anytime there's that job you're going for that it sounds interesting, but we all have this like imposter syndrome. And I never imagined that anyone else does. Like I would never have imagined that you would have imposter syndrome about a role,
Oh,
or
big
anyone.
time.
So yeah, the fact that that exists is just a really universal concept.
Yeah. No, that's a big thing. And I like to think in my current age, I'm like, fuck it. Like I'll
Yeah.
give it a shot. And if I
Yep.
fail, I'll learn something along the way. Um,
Absolutely.
going back to my younger self, I would have been like, believe in yourself a little more. You got this.
Right. Absolutely. And so Anna, you came in from Dismakers and you
Mhm.
came in, and I am going to go here because you've told me
I
this
knew you were
before.
gonna.
Yeah. The reason why I actually really love this story from you, but you've told me this before. Tell me about your first day at CD Baby.
Oh dear Lord. So when a company gets sold to a bigger, maybe more corporate feeling company, there are feelings,
Mm.
which I think were fair, and I think that the history. I wasn't there for the history, but the impression I get is that the information wasn't shared in a really forthcoming way with the current set of employees of CD Baby. So they were told like, oh, hey, by the way, we are being bought by disc makers like one day. And then I showed up the next day. Like I like rolled in, like moved myself and my
Right.
baby child.
Not knowing what you're getting into, really.
No, from Philadelphia to Oregon by ourselves, me and my kid. And I show up on the first day and they had not yet let go the person who held my new position.
What was
So
that position? Just
I was the director of customer service at the time.
right. Okay.
So that was my new
Wow.
title. I had been doing project management at disc makers. So they had said like, hey, you're really good at customer service. You're really good with people. And you look sort of like the people that work at CD Baby was like the vibe, right? Because, I had the blue hair or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I show up on the first day. They have not let go my predecessor. So I'm
Mm.
like waiting in a hallway, like waiting for her to leave. And it was awful because she was very well liked and very well respected by the team. And I had no idea that this was going to happen. So then like she leaves and I walk into her office and take over. And I was mortified because I had no
Whoa.
idea. It was awful. And I will say that the reception initially was not great all around from folks. I did have several people who come up to me and be very kind and welcoming, which I really appreciated. And those became my kind of touch point people for a long time because I was like,
Mhm.
okay, these people are going to be nice to me.
Mhm.
The first time I walked into the warehouse, somebody was like, our overlords have joined us or something like that. Like, um, and I was like, I was 20. How old was I in 2008? I was 27.
Yeah.
It's like,
You're like
I was young and I was like, I'm not anybody's overlord. Like I
the
live in a
opposite of corporate,
yeah, like I
looking.
was not that person at all. And so I came in as director of customer service and it was a real learning curve because up until then it had been sort of like a self-run situation despite having leadership in place. And so there were no metrics. I didn't know how many times the phone rang in a day. I didn't know how many emails we were getting. I didn't know what the support real needs were. I didn't really
Right.
understand any of that. So I had to learn all of that along with most of the business, because I had done when I was at Disc Makers, we had a relationship with CD Baby where we would send people CDs and their metadata, and CD Baby would set them up with an account. So I had been working with CD Baby in some capacity since I started at Disc Maker. So it wasn't new, but it felt very different being on a different coast by myself in this sort of non-welcoming environment initially. And then as time went on, I feel like one of the things that I love about CD Baby is that people are there because they really want to be there. You know, like people work at CD Baby because they care about artists and they care about what happens to independent music, and like leaning into that with everyone and being like, so do I. And that's what I care about. And so I'm going to answer the phone and I'm going to answer the emails and I'm going to learn everything and I'm going to shadow everyone and I'm going to figure out what everybody does and what everybody's good at. It very quickly became much better in terms
absolutely.
of like the community. Like I felt like, you know, a community got formed, and I did that job for 12 years before I moved into my current role as I moved into director of product, and then I was senior director of product, and then I was VP of product. But that's another imposter syndrome 101 for you right there. It's like I was ready to move on from customer service. I learned so much about our artists and about our team and about what we do as a business. I was ready to like put that knowledge to use somewhere else. And, but man, did I keep myself up nights about like, can I even do this? I don't know how to do this. I've never done this before. And now
we have
it's
so
5 years.
many wonderful people that did start in customer service or did start picking up the phones, and I feel like it really was training to learn so much about, you know, our audience and our customers and the artists that we're working with. And if anything, it taught me so much about just how to speak to artists and how to have conversations. And it would quickly turn into just advice. You know, people would call and just say, how do I market this? But yeah, I mean, so much has changed and so much has sort of evolved in that time. And you touched on this a little bit, Christine, when you first came on and talked about how iTunes had just come on the scene we've started at 1998, right? Or end of 97, just doing physical CD distribution. So then by the time you came on in 2006, we were starting to touch digital, right?
Yeah. Physical was still the primary revenue source for everybody. I mean, I remember the first time we got our first $1 million report from iTunes, and it was like, holy shit, this thing is like, it's real.
Yeah.
But that was a big deal. And then there's all these different milestones where it's like the first $1 million pay week, the first $1 million Apple report, the first this, the first that. So it was very much physical was the thing. Downloads, people were skeptical of them, but getting into it, they're like, oh, I can get paid from this.
And it was probably a little simpler at the time too, because that was basically the landscape, was just either physical or 99-cent downloads. And the rules were the rules. It was like, you're going to get paid X amount for every 99 cents sold. And that was that. There wasn't like this, well, this platform pays this fraction of a penny, and like all the things that we ended up seeing later with streaming.
Yeah. There's that glorious minute of tethered downloads. That was a fun thing to try.
I don't even remember that. Yeah.
It's not memorable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like Apple was big. Obviously, when I started in 2008, Apple was like really big, but Spotify was becoming a thing. We heard about it. We knew it existed. It was not accessible in the US yet, but we had these other like smaller downloads, like Amy Street was one. And I remember the big thing being really that like cultural shift of knowledge of like, CDs were CDs. Everybody was really comfortable with that. They knew what their margins were. It made sense to spend $3 per disc to manufacture if you could sell it for $15.99, you know, or whatever.
Yeah.
But with downloads and streaming, it became this really interesting educational opportunity for us. And a lot of my time in that period was spent figuring out how to explain downloads to every user. And, you know, thinking about trying to explain a cell phone to your great grandmother. It's like, and I don't mean that in an ageist way. It's like, it's just a thing that did not exist when she was alive. Right. So like explaining this thing that did not exist and now is in existence, just people who have no idea what it is it's really fun. I mean, to try to explain that. And so that was, that became the big focus for us was that education piece. And I really think that that's when we started approaching customer service like education. And that's what
Right.
and that's what we do today still. It's like, let's educate people. Let's help them understand how to do this on their own. And that really started with the advent of downloads and streaming, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And then I think that's around the time that maybe the blog and the podcast, and we had like these editorial sections when we had a store at one point, where we also like leaned into that educational stuff. But those, I remember even in 2013, those phone calls were very much, how do we just give you some information about what's happening in the industry and how can, you apply this to your release. It's interesting though that now it feels like at that point the education was about digital, and now we're trying to almost do the opposite, like re-educate younger artists about like the power of physical, again.
I think that it's funny because nowadays it's like, no, you could make a CD, like you could do that. And that people like that. People like an object. I buy vinyl at shows still all the time. And there was a good 10 years where I didn't buy physical media, but now I'm like, oh, I got to get that on vinyl. I got to do it. I don't buy
Yeah.
CDs anymore, if I'm being really honest, but it's only because I don't have a way to play them, but I do have a record player. So
Yeah.
when somebody offers vinyl, I'm like, sign me up, let me do it.
I know,
but my kids
absolutely.
don't know how to use a record player, or,
Yeah.
like the younger generation just doesn't know as much about those
Although
old
I'm seeing
IDs.
I'm seeing the resurgence, because I'll go to the record store and I'll see a bunch of teenagers buying tapes or buying CDs and collecting the same CDs I used to have. Like I saw someone the other day. They looked like they were 14 years old buying a Korn album. But yes,
Well, all
we're
right
back.
then.
We're back. The
We're back.
90s have returned. Okay, so do you have? I guess Anna, you probably started right like at the exit of Derek Sivers, the original founder of CD Baby. But Christine, you obviously have memories. Are there any that stand out? Anything worth sharing that stand out?
There was one. There was one meeting. I remember it was Derek gathered everyone up, and he was like, "Sales are down 40%," and he was in a like, it was like, "Oh God, like there's something terrible going on." And then like a day later, he's like, "I forgot to move the decimal. It's 4%," and it was like, "Oh, okay."
Wow.
Much better. Which that honestly, that I'm like, yeah, he's human. Like it seems like something that I would do. I'd look at something and be like, have a panic and be like, oh wait, no, I read it wrong. But no, the aside from that, the most memorable thing was just like his communication, and like everything was so short, so snappy, so to the point. And it was just like people really resonated with people.
Yeah.
And that was something, like he was a master at that. And
Yeah.
like I wish I could distill my communications the way that he did his. And I think that was, really crucial to the early adoption. Like it was just like this like magnetism in the way that he spoke and wrote. And
I can't tell you how many times I'm sure you've heard it, and I've heard it in person. I've heard it on the phone, and I know you know exactly what I'm going to say. I am friends with Derek Sivers.
100%.
From like every artist I've ever talked to that's ever used CD Baby before 2008 said they were friends with Derek Sivers. And while I truly believe that there's something to that, I also think it was just amazing communication and interpersonal skills. And that is definitely, I think, one of the biggest highlights of the thing that sort of built the personalization that CD Baby had, along with everything else that came after that and everything that you built with customer service as well, I think.
I agree with that. Like, I think, having talked to lots and lots of artists over the years, you're absolutely correct that if anybody ever met Derek, they were his friend. And that speaks to his magnetism. I never got to meet him, but I do think it's interesting because he was this like kind of genius guy. He had this idea that turned into this amazing company that's lasted so long, but also it was very much the Wild West,
right?
From like coming into it from the outside in the beginning. I was like, what is happening here?
It's
like
chaos.
the way that, the environment in the office was very much unlike anything I'd ever experienced.
Right.
The stories I would hear, the things I would see, I was like, oh, wow, this is not a corporate America situation. Which is what I come from, like a warehouse in Pensacola, New Jersey.
Yeah.
A cool one, but like to hear where I was like, is that is that a battle axe on the wall? Like, why is there a dolphin hanging from the ceiling? Or,
Oh, yeah, I remember
whatever.
the
And I would
dolphin.
hear stories. I heard a story once where the customer service team showed up and there was a note on the door that was like, "You've been outsourced." And he outsourced customer service to somewhere overseas. And we still, to this day, would find emails where it was like clearly no one that ever worked at CD Baby's name in an email thread with an artist. And it only lasted like 2 weeks, I think. And then, he brought everybody back. But it was like he would take these kind of moonshots where he'd be like, maybe this is the way we're going to modernize. Boom, we're just going to do it.
Oh my
Or like,
gosh.
he didn't have, I mean, I think that's a kind of sort of startup mentality, right? Where you
Yeah,
don't
that's
have
that
the
early tech.
trappings of investors and everything else. Yeah. So it was really cool to come in and have it to see this kind of like free spirited,
Mhm.
really kind of casual work
Very
environment.
punk rock. Yeah.
Very generous description, Anna.
I'm
Very
being
generous.
diplomatic, Christine. This is why you like me. Yeah, no, I mean, but there was,
Yeah,
it
I've
was,
heard some crazy stories
uh-huh.
for sure.
Yeah.
I also remember hearing a story. There was now we're all very much mostly remote, but before this, we were in a really lovely office that still is there in Portland. And then before that, we were in a less lovely office, but that's when I entered. And then before that, there was like a real Wild West warehouse. And I remember hearing a story that there was like a button. There was like a mystery button on the wall, and
Yeah.
if you pressed the button,
Yes.
the cops came or something.
Yes, because it used to be like a credit union or something, the office that we inhabited
Oh,
on 80th and Columbia. And there was a button on the wall. And if you pushed it, it was a panic button and the police would come.
oh my
And
god.
so I think that only happened once while I was
I,
there.
I
But
believe it was when we moved out because there had always been a post-it note on the wall that said, "Do not push this button like under any circumstance," and that people just would abide by the post-it
That
the
is
one
until the
rule
day that
everyone
we
followed
moved.
surprising.
somehow.
Yeah.
I don't know.
If I saw a button that said "Do not press," it would be very
I'm pushing the
challenging for
button.
me
I
not to
mean,
push
right? Okay.
it. Well,
Yeah.
what was the size of the company in the time that you started, Christine, versus, I mean, now I don't even know what the number is. It's in the hundreds, right?
Yeah, when I started, I would say there was like maybe like 55 of us or
Oh,
so.
okay. That's
So
more than I
less than
expected.
60. Yeah. It was almost all in the warehouse and
Mhm.
customer service. But yeah, I felt very much the outcast for a very long time because I was hired from the outside and I didn't come up through the
Oh,
warehouse or
sure.
through customer support.
Right.
I literally worked in a different building even
Mhm.
because we were spread across like three
3
different warehouses
warehouses, and
within this one,
Whoa, I didn't
they
know
were all
that.
connected, but, like, you couldn't
sort
walk
of.
through them because there was a
Yeah.
bakery in between. So, like,
Oh,
you could get from warehouse 2 to warehouse 3, but to get from warehouse 1 to warehouse 2 and 3, you had to walk around the bakery outside.
whoa.
And, like, all the baking old dudes smoking cigarettes outside and big barrels of flour and it was very weird. But if you worked in the warehouse and you were picking CDs to ship, you had to sometimes go to warehouse 3 in the rain because we live in Portland, Oregon,
Mhm.
and, have carts pushed up a parking lot hill in the rain to get back into the I mean, it was and Christine, yeah, you worked in warehouse too, didn't you? That one or
Yeah.
maybe it was 3, whatever,
Yeah, I
you were
don't
in a
know which
different
one.
building. I saw you once
Yeah.
every 6 weeks, maybe.
I remember walking through the warehouse in the office, the first office I had joined, and that one was huge, absolutely at the time, and physical was still very predominant, and that was one of those moments where I felt like, "Oh, shit, I work in the music industry," because I would walk around or sometimes if I was just having a bad day or having a bad call or whatever, I'd go take a break and go walk through the CDs, and that would give me perspective, like, I felt like, "Oh, this is a really, really cool job." Like, I'm looking at the music made by the people I'm talking to on the phone. It really put everything into perspective that this is more than a job. Like, I'm an artist helping artists, and that was so powerful. At least it was a big push, I think, in the trajectory of the rest of my career and the rest of, like, the way I approach music, period.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. There is something pretty cool about realizing that you work in the music industry.
Mhm. I mean, a job
Uh,
is a job is a job, but
sure.
like, when you really take a step back and you realize what this job is, and it's helping other artists, it's sort of mind-blowing.
And we're so lucky that we get to do it. And it's, even when I was in customer service and, any customer service job, there's horror stories or, stories
Mhm.
about really challenging interactions with clients
Oh,
or
yeah.
whatever. Even those, I look back now and I'm like, they were just confused or they just
Mhm.
needed help or they just didn't know. But there were days when I would have to be like, oh, that was a rough escalation. I'm gonna walk out into the warehouse and
Mhm.
just absorb some like good energy
Positive.
from yes. Because there were some times when it was, it could get pretty rough. And when you're talking
Yeah.
to people about their art and it's stuff that they're so passionate about, it's so hard
Mhm.
to expect them to be rational if they're upset or.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that that's one of the things that working in this industry, period, but also working in our place of business, which is independent music, there is this extra pressure where it feels like I feel like a sole responsibility to every artist that I talk to if they can't figure something out or if they can't get something out in time. I get really attached to making sure that their end result gets solved, even when at a certain point I'm like, well, there is a team that can handle this. I still can find myself getting like emotionally involved about making sure that I don't know. It's something about being like, I get you. I understand exactly what you're going through, and I want this to work out for you. And yeah, that's the power of indie music, I think.
I think that's also what makes CD Baby special. Is that's like,
It's a
you
lot of
know,
people that feel the same way.
well, yeah. And you mentioned that
Mhm.
so many people come out of customer service in the warehouse.
Mhm.
And I mean, anybody who's met me for more than 5 minutes knows that this is like my claim to fame, but managing customer service for 12 years, like I did, so many people who worked in customer service that I hired are now
Mhm.
doing the podcast or director of international marketing
Mhm.
or a top database administrator or everywhere around the company you see people who came up through the ranks, really learned what our artists need. They actually really care about what they're doing because they're artists
Mhm.
themselves or they're creative people. I'm not a musician, but I'm a creative person, and so
Mhm.
that makes it really special. And I'm so proud of the fact that I got to do that for 12 years. I mean,
Yeah.
not just help our artists, but really like populate CD Baby with awesome people. And
Mhm.
I mean, it's my superpower. I'm really good at picking good people.
Yes, you are.
Um, and you were an excellent example of that, Christina.
Oh, thanks.
Yay.
Thanks. What are some of the values that you think we have carried with us? Because I'm sure there so much has changed, obviously. We started super punk rock, like you said, it was the Wild West. We were very early internet, very early tech startup company that did sort of pioneer this whole distribution landscape for indie artists. And now, I mean, we're a very well polished and very well oiled machine. We are a ship out to sea. We have done this. We have been doing it. We've adapted. But what are some of the values that you believe that we've carried with us throughout? Because it's hard sometimes to hold on to your original value.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Anna was just saying is so many of the people that work here
Mhm.
legitimately care. We care so much about our artists. Like we
Yeah.
want what's best for them. We're not out trying to, nickel and dime people or be snake oil salesmen. It's like we want you to have a platform to sell your art, to get your art out into the world for people to appreciate. And I think that's what drives most of the people that I talk to that work here.
Mhm.
And I think that's been the constant from day one. It's like I come from a royalty audit background where it was like I was looking out for the artist and auditing like big labels and
Mhm.
publishers, and I was like, yes, I'm finding ways to get money back into the hands of the artist or the publisher,
Yes.
and that's very satisfying. And the parallels at CD Baby, I'm like, I love it. Like I love that we pay our
Mhm.
artists every single week. Like
Mhm.
we just we legitimately care about them and want what's good for them. So that's something that has not changed in all of my 18
Absolutely.
years.
Yeah,
I also
absolutely.
think that like there's this grassroots kind of,
Mhm.
when I came in 2008, it was the Wild West, but it was kind of scrappy and there
Mhm.
was the development team was just like doing whatever work to like
Mhm.
push code out there and make it work. And there were workarounds. We talk about
Mhm.
workarounds all the time because back then we were pretty limited with what we were growing really fast too. And when you grow really fast, you're kind of like, oh crap, I'm outgrowing this one thing, but I haven't built the infrastructure to support the bigger thing yet. So let's just build on top of and not to say we've kept doing that, but that scrappy attitude, that idea that like we'll just hack it and make
Mhm.
it work if we have to. And
Yeah.
we're all kind of on board to do that. And and that not only with like our technology side, but just in general, I feel like we are all pretty, I mean, I know Christine and I have both spent hours and hours inputting data into spreadsheets because
hmm
a certain team needed help, or, you know, we've answered tickets or done some inspection of albums or whatever. And people kind of go outside of whatever their job description is all the time at CD Baby,
Absolutely.
because it doesn't matter. It's like, if we can get this done to do the best thing for the artist, we do it. And that's, I think that's one of the other big things that has traveled with us through time. You know, we just kind of all are still kind of scrappy, you know?
I know. It's really funny because anytime I talk to anybody about what it is that I have done here, it like that title has evolved and shifted so many times. But some of those things just also haven't changed, you know, like a lot of what we're doing with the podcast or the blog is sort of what I was doing 10 years ago with answering phones. Like these skills have been able to adapt over time. And I also think one of the things that we've done really well is the adapting over time is, even though it can feel scrappy and it does feel like sometimes we're sort of building the plane while it's already in the air, it is because things are always, always, always evolving. Like in 5 minutes, there will be a new product or there will be something else that has changed in the music industry. And we have to just like shift and adapt in the blink of an eye. But the fact that we're still committed to trying to at least trying to keep that up with that is, I think, pretty impressive for a company that's been around for 25 years, you know?
For sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's pretty cool. And we're like, you know, I think as we go and as we get better at our technology and as we kind of, you know, change our approach to things, you know, we're just really adaptable, which I really like. And that
Mhm.
idea of like, oh, all of a sudden, like when Apple would be like, oh, by the way, Apple Music's coming in
Right.
2 weeks. We'd be like,
Oh,
all
and
right,
it's
well,
no
let's
longer
make it
called
happen.
iTunes. Yeah.
You're right, and we would have to
Right.
shift, and I
Yeah.
would say that all the time to my team in customer service, like, as soon as you get comfortable with the information you know, throw it out the window because new information is coming, and you're gonna have to learn that and be able to explain it like you're an expert to
Mhm.
artists that same day. Good luck, have fun, and
Absolutely.
but we all care so much that we do it, you know? And it's just,
Yeah.
I think that's also the most exciting part about working here. I think that's
Mhm.
like, if you ask anybody who's been here a long time why they stay, part of
Yeah.
it, I mean, the majority of it is like the people are amazing and why we all work here is amazing. But we stay because it's not boring, because
Right.
it changes
Yeah.
all the time.
Every
Because
day.
the knowledge I had, I was an expert in 2008. I was an
Mhm.
expert in 2012. I was an expert in, those expertise are very different, you know, like what I knew in 2008 is not even applicable today, but it,
I know. Even just culturally, you know, how we ingest music or how we promote music or these things evolve so quickly. How we promoted an album a year ago is no longer going to be applicable today on using other platforms, you know? So that stuff is really challenging, but it is, I think, the reason that I'm still here is because it keeps me on my frickin' toes, you know?
truth.
Is
Yeah.
there anything that you feel like was an innovation that we embraced before everybody else?
I think our attention to like metadata and
Mhm.
metadata cleanliness, this is like the least sexy topic. I'm so
Oh,
sorry.
I like
But
it.
we embraced, you know, that our all of the DSPs, all the major providers were wanting consistent data coming in.
Mhm.
They wanted to be able to present a unified experience to their customers. And we really leaned in on that. And we have
Mhm.
a team of humans that still does that every day, that looks at every title before it goes out to
Yeah.
make sure it's going to meet those requirements so that it goes up. And we've been really I think influential in the industry and maintaining that like high level, the high standard, and
Mhm.
it separates us from others, I think, because we're if you submit with us and we let you go through, you're going up. You're going to be
Yeah.
on your platform that you want to be on. And that's something that other providers can't necessarily guarantee, and that feels really special to me. And it's not super high tech, but it's this decision that we made
Mhm.
early on to be the leaders there, and we still
Mhm.
are, and I think it shows in our relationships
Definitely.
with our partners.
I agree with that. I mean, from my world, um, I think something that we were ahead of things were dealing with fraud. You know,
Mm.
we used to operate a retail store, and that was how I first discovered credit card fraud was a thing
Oh
that
my
would
gosh.
keep me up at night. And so we first started wrapping our arms around that and figuring out how to get that under control. And then that shifted and morphed, and now
Mhm.
it's like, you know, streaming abuse and all sorts of different types of fraud and new, more creative ways to deal with that. And you know, launching Music Fights Fraud this past summer, like that was the ultimate nerd goal for me. Like, that's something that had been on my mind for almost a decade at that point. And so the fact that now it's a thing, and we're working as collectively as an industry, particularly with independent distributors, like that's huge.
Yeah,
warms
absolutely.
warms my nerdy heart.
Speaking to both subjects, I guess, in inspections and also fraud, one of my early memories are people that would sign up their albums because they thought if they used like a name that sounded like a famous person's name, they would just pop up in the search like higher up. So they would maybe name their album Jay-Z and then their artist name would be, whatever. And then also people that would just, I mean, it still happens today. I just saw one, Cristina and I just talked about one yesterday. It was a Travis Scott album that somebody signed up and tried to claim as their own. I mean, that if we didn't have systems in place to search for that, would have just been an absolute like minefield. And I believe that is something that we offered that sort of happened before other distributors did as well. That like sifting through and making sure that BS wasn't going up.
Well, yeah, and I think it to me that like when I've explained that to people, because I've had to be like, no, sorry, you can't name your album Beyonce's Best or whatever.
Right.
It's like but we're trying to establish that independent musicians are as credible as major label musicians. And part of that is being really strict about what we let you call your title, because we don't want you to be a laughing stock. We want you to be legit. And so to me, that's like, while it also helps us save money and not get sued by major labels, it also really truly does what we want, which is level that playing field and help create credibility for independent musicians, because that's what they want. That's what we want for them. And I just think that's
stifling my creative vision.
I want to share a little anecdote. This is from years ago when we still had our retail store. It's a fraud thing that I just remembered. There's this one release that it was on the top of our chart on our cdbaby.com retail store, and we're like, what is this release? Like, never heard of it, not getting plays anywhere else, but top of the charts. And my Kevin, who's on my team, he was looking into it and he's like, oh, these transactions don't quite look right. Like, it looks like it's all coming from like the same person that maybe signed it up. And so he called and left a voicemail and was like, oh, I have some concerns. He got a voicemail in return and it was this woman's husband. And he was like, I am so sorry. He's like, I thought the world was run by robots. I didn't think anyone would notice. I really wanted to make my wife happy and think that her music was really popular. And I was like, oh my God, it was the sweetest thing. But also like I thought the world was run by robots has become a running, like we refer to that on the regular on my team. But I was like, oh, so sweet.
That's
oh my
amazing.
gosh, that is the sweetest story I've ever.
That's really cute. Like really, really cute.
It's like your mom buying everything that you know.
Totally. Yeah. I was like, oh.
What are some moments you've maybe had that were particularly challenging that your team or that we all as a company sort of had to push through and work together with?
Oh man. How much time do we have left? Because
yeah.
I mean, I will say, so like personally, like on my own individual, I will just say that like I had a really awful experience. I've had several like pretty scary ones where, somebody would show up at the office and refuse to leave. I've had to call the police a few times because, whatever. But the one that was the worst was when I was doxxed by a person that I had fired. We use our inspection system to also prevent hate speech, which is really important to me. And I fired this client because the music that they were releasing was hate speech and under no uncertain terms we were going to distribute it.
Right.
But I operated with my full name and my emails and everything else. So he had my name and he doxed me to his many millions of followers. All of my bank accounts were hacked. My personal email was hacked. It was almost 6 years ago.
Yeah, I know the client because I remember dealing with the social media aspect of it. But you got the worst of it. Absolutely.
And it was the day we adopted my youngest kid. Like the day of their adoption was the day that happened. So I didn't have access to any money. We couldn't It was awful. It was terrible. It did not overshadow my day because obviously like my kid being adopted was more important, but it was really rough. So personally, that was when I was like, that was right before
Oh
I
my
was asked to
God.
interview for the product position. And I was like, yep,
Get me out of here.
get me out of here. We had a couple bad snowstorms actually. And I remember it being really important at the time that we keep answering the phones regardless. And this
I
was
was there for one of those.
pre laptops, you know,
Yeah.
like we all had desktop computers. You remember those?
Mhm.
And giant monitors and everything. And I had people volunteer to sleep at the office,
Yeah.
make sure that we were still supporting our artists, even though, you know, we were all snowed in. And thankfully, you know, we had heat and water and whatever. But it was, I mean, that's dedication, you know, when
Yeah.
people are like, you know what, let me just sleep at the office so that we
Oh
can
my
make sure,
gosh.
because we couldn't drive because Portland, Oregon doesn't get snow. And so if it snows here, you're
Yeah.
not going anywhere. And it was just, I mean, really beautiful. I remember at the time I was just very like verklempt about it, you know, like it just made me feel so privileged to be working with a group of people that would be willing to like sleep at the office.
Has some dedication. I
Right?
remember one of those snowstorms and you and Gretchen, who is head of HR, walking in the snow to go get supplies for sandwiches. And it was one of the best sandwich days of my life. but but yeah, the dedication that takes is that yeah, you don't do that unless you love your job.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Trying to think, for me, I think the biggest shift and change that I saw, the biggest challenge, was more internal culture
Mhm.
shift. You know, Anna talks about how when the day that she walked in, her predecessor was still in the office. I had been on jury duty for a month, and I came back and I sit down. I'm like, okay, fire up my emails after being gone for a month, and I've got all these emails from our bankers about these new accounts, and I'm like, oh, I think I think you sent this to the wrong person because I don't recognize these names. And they're like, oh yeah, no, you have new owners. And I was like,
Oh my God, I'd never heard
okay.
that
That
story.
was how I found out that we got acquired. So that was a surprise to
Oh my
me.
gosh.
And you know, it was very much Wild West. Like,
Yeah.
looking back, maybe we were a bunch of bratty teenagers in terms of how the company maybe behaved. It was fun. People were passionate. But then we were acquired by disc makers, and they brought this level of maturity
Mhm.
and order to
Mhm.
chaos. And at first, like, that hurt. Like, that
Mhm.
was a struggle. It's like, what do you mean we're gonna do lean whatever?
Mhm.
What do you mean we're
Like,
going to clock in?
Yeah.
yeah, it's like the most like unhip, exciting, fun things. But thank God, like,
Mhm.
I don't think we'd be here today if it were not for that. Like,
No,
that
structure
process,
is
that
needed.
change was so, it was very hard, but very, very necessary. And we're better for it.
Well, and I think too, anytime there's change, it's just gonna it's uncomfortable. To evolve is uncomfortable. And even in the 10 years that I've been here, I've seen it happen over and over again where it's always going to be uncomfortable to adapt and to change. And often once you get past that discomfort, there's something really amazing and beautiful on the other end of it, which is where we're at today. You know, I don't think we're anywhere near just waking up and finding out we have new owners anymore in an email. I would hope, knock on wood.
Hopefully, yeah, hopefully we're a little better with communications
Hopefully.
around that sort of thing. But who knows?
I think there's like
Anything's
that what is that? When things sort of like even out, like that entropy or whatever, or
Mhm.
like when
state.
you know, yeah, like when two forces come together, they're like sort of, they feel opposed initially. So like mature corporate, you know, versus grassroots punk rock DIY. I think that there was this period of like, it has to be one or the other, and that's
Mhm.
what it felt like, kind of. And then
Yeah.
the more we worked together and the more that we all learned as a group, like, oh, actually we can spend our time doing better and more interesting things when we use these corporate tactics of like
Mhm.
reducing wasted work and, you know, addressing issues for customers before they
Mhm.
happen, you know, and all of that. And I think we've come to a really nice stasis of like that combination of, we're still grassroots, we're still DIY, but we also are mature and more polished and professional, and, you know, we can hold our own
Mhm.
in the corporate world, but we're still, you know, we're still enjoying it. I feel like the thing I feel like the challenges have been rough, but the amazing parts have been better. Do you know what I mean? For me, like looking back over the last 18 years, I've had so many amazing moments and like things happen to me in my life, not necessarily even at work, but like because of where I work, that, really stick with me and make it feel, I don't know, just really special. Like when I talk about my experiences to people that aren't in the music industry or aren't at CD Baby, they're like, "What? Like
Yeah.
that's not real. That didn't happen." I'm like, "Yes, it did, and it's amazing." Like
Yeah.
I had this client at Disc Makers, and I'll name him because he's great. His name is Jim Scafish, and he puts out these kind of like really quirky albums and stuff. And I was his project manager at Disc Makers for years. The whole time I was there, he was my client, and I worked with him on all these releases. And then I left, and I came to CD Baby, and I never thought about him. He's just a client, and uh, he had called Disc Makers to do a new album. He found out that I wasn't there anymore. He found out where I had gone. He found me at CD Baby, and he called to check in to make sure I was doing okay.
Oh my gosh.
How my transition had gone from the East Coast to the West Coast. He and I had the same dog name, like his dog's name was Loki and my dog's name was Loki, and we had like bonded about that. So then we like caught up on how the dogs were doing. And this would happen over the course of the next 12 years that I was at CD in customer service. He would just call to check in. And it's like, that's really special.
Yeah.
He didn't need to do that. It was just like, those kinds of moments, or like my very favorite moment probably ever is I was at one of the DIY cons, one of our conferences, and this guy came up to me and he was like, "Hey, do you work at CD Baby?" And I was like wearing a CD Baby crew shirt with a CD Baby thing. I'm like, "Yep, sure do." And he was like, "Oh, this is my first conference. I'm here. This is so cool." And I was like, "That's awesome. Like, how are you enjoying it so far?" And he was like, "It's great. I brought my dad." And his dad was there, and his dad was like, "Hey, I'm so and so." And I was like, "Oh, it's so great to meet you. Like, tell me about yourself. What do you do? Are you a musician? Blah blah blah." So we talked for maybe 15 minutes in the middle of this huge conference hall.
Right.
And he was like, "Listen, I really want to work at CD Baby someday." And I was like, "Well, you got to apply, man. You got to apply." And then we shook hands. We never saw each other again. And then I got a letter in the mail from this guy that I met at the conference. And he was like, "I just want you to know this, so great meeting you, blah, blah, blah. I hope we get to see each other again." And then like 2 weeks later, he applied. I hired him, and he still
You're
works
talking
in
about
customer service.
Austin?
Yes.
Oh.
And it was so, it was one of those, like, had I been too busy
Yeah.
or like too, but it's that like, I was there to talk to artists, and it didn't matter that I was supposed to be somewhere, whatever. Like, this guy stopped me and he wanted to talk to me and connect. So we did. And then he's been like one of the best hires that I could have made. And he's been here for a really long time now, and he's just excellent to work with. And so there's things like that where I'm just like, this is so freaking special, you guys.
Yeah. That's definitely what the next thing I was going to ask was the most rewarding experiences you've had. And for me, it's always centered around our artists or meeting them in person, or all the way down to, I remember we used to have shows in our office at lunchtime or at break time. And I remember seeing Mary Gauthier perform like my first week. She performed my first week. Yeah, I remember, and she told like these amazing stories, and I was like, man, I've never heard of this artist, but she is incredible, and she so powerful. I like cried about it. And then flash forward to this year, I had a DIY musician pop-up event in Nashville, and we hired Mary to speak, and she performed like an impromptu song, acoustic, no mic, just to the room of like 200 CD Baby artists that traveled from all over the country to come. And I got chills. I was crying. Once again, it transported me to 10 years ago and why I got into this in the first place. It was like, our artists are so special. And the fact that they have this community that is sort of built around the fact that they all use the same distributors already just mind-blowing and beautiful, but also that they will travel from all over the country to have shared experiences and to learn from each other, and all the way to the top where we have these artists that have been with us from the very beginning that are sort of these guiding lights and these champions for the rest of them. Like, it's a pretty incredible community, and I'm really proud to be a part of it.
Another one of those, Chris Purica played in our cafeteria once, and that was an amazing show, like really good. Creed Bratton came once and played for us, and that was at the it was upstairs in like our communal space, and I remember being like, that guy's singing, but he's from The Office. Like, what
Yeah.
is happening? Like, I was so confused. And then one of my very favorite CD Baby artists ever, it's a band called Red Molly, and they played for us once they came. And I remember being like, maybe I like country music. Like, what is
Yeah.
happening? But
Yeah.
they've been on my favorite list since then. I just love them so much.
Wow.
And I feel like I've gotten the opportunity to see a lot of really amazing artists play live,
Mhm.
whether like as associated with our conference and at like open mics or curated showcases, or at our like CD Baby showcases. We used to do like parties where employee bands would come and play, and that was always really cool because you work with these people and theoretically that they're talented because they tell you they're musicians, but
Yeah.
you don't know. And then or you go to karaoke with somebody and you're like, well, crap, I'm never singing karaoke again. That person's amazing.
Yeah.
Ahem, Cristina.
Oh. Well,
It's like, so cool.
one of those showcases we had, and one of our employees, Mark, started playing. His band Volcanic Pinnacle started playing. I just knew Mark as someone in customer service. I thought he was so like a really great employee, but then I saw him play drums and I was like, holy crap, my brain exploded. I'd never seen anyone so good at drums in my life. Still to this day have not. And I remember going up to him, this was like 7 years ago, going up to him and saying, one day we got to make music together. And then he ended up recording drums for my album. Like those experiences are so amazing. You don't get those working at Google. Okay.
I feel like we've built this like family between employees, former employees, artists, people who got their start on CD Baby and now have moved on. Like, it's just a really cool community to be a part of. And if you tell anybody who knows what CD Baby is, they're like, what? You work at CD Baby? It just feels really special to be a part of that kind of big community. And especially after so long, to have it not feel like trite or played out. Like, it still feels really genuine and authentic to me. It doesn't feel like we're forcing it. It doesn't feel like, it's not manufactured. It's just like, this is who we are as a group of people. And that's just really pretty rad.
Absolutely. Also, I met my husband here.
Yes, you did. I hired him too.
I know. So thank you for that. I mean, had you not, who knows? I could be lonely forever.
I mean, I will take credit for your happiness, Cristina.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I also just wanted to say, I was thinking about this today as I was going through Instagram, which is that I follow a bunch of people that I've met that are our artists over the years. And I was thinking about how amazing it is to sort of see their evolution over the years. Like, again, these could be people that we answered phones 10 years ago and somehow we made a connection. Maybe I met them at a conference or whatever, got their information, started following them, and I'm seeing them fully evolve. Truly powerful artists, and it's so incredible to watch that happen.
I feel like it all the time. I have the same. I follow a lot of artists that I met or talked to or whatever, and there's a couple in particular that I'm just watching their journey and going like, so cool. Like, whether or not CD Baby's still part of their journey, it's still really cool to see people kind of realize themselves as artists and like find their niche.
Well, and it's cool because one of the things that makes us special, I believe, is that we cater to an entire spectrum of artists. I often talk about how sometimes there are people that are part of the CD Baby family that don't actually have anything ready to go. They just know in their hearts that one day they're going to release something. Maybe they don't know how to play an instrument, or they haven't actually recorded anything yet, but they know, I'm a musician. So they go ahead and they start signing up an account. And so we have those artists all the way to artists that have been touring for 30 years to, all the way at the pro level and building their entire careers and incomes out of it. So that spectrum really lends itself to this incredible variety of characters that we get to meet along the way. And yeah, you guys are why we're here. So thanks.
Heck yeah.
Community. It's really hard to not end this on the cheesiest note ever. But
I know. I'm like, let me just tell one more cool story about how awesome our artists are,
Always.
how cool our employees are, whatever.
One of the things that I am most proud of in my tenure here, it's not artist facing at all. It is completely internal. When we were acquired by Downtown, I was able to work with Gretchen in HR, and we were able to implement family leave plans, a sabbatical program, and just being able to take care of our people that way was so important. And I'm like, I was done having kids by the time that we implemented this, but I'm like, I want it to be better for the next people when they have kids. And like, it makes me so happy when I see posts being like, I'm out on maternity leave. I'm like, yes, and you're being compensated for it. That's awesome. So just being able to take care of our people, both like that work here and also the people that use our services.
Thank you both so much for being a part of this. I really appreciate your perspective and for giving me all these amazing stories.
It's awesome to
Thank
talk to you.
Yeah.